Yep,
Okay,
ready.
okay, here we go. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Corby Connections. I'm Rick Stahl, president of Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg. Tonight, our special guest is Lou Nanni, University Relations at Notre Dame, at the University of Notre Dame. His role at Notre Dame is Development Advisory Council, Special Events, and the Notre Dame Alumni Association, and a special friend of Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg. At this time, I want to bring in our host, Pat Colley. Pat, take her away.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Lou. I think before going any further, I have to recognize that you are joining this tiny little Notre Dame club from a small town in Pennsylvania the very day after Notre Dame Day, which has got to be one of the big events on your annual calendar as far as fundraising goes. So I just want to say thank you for that level of commitment to us.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Rick. I have to say that I've probably visited 40, 50, maybe 60 clubs through the Alumni Association over the years, and I'll never forget my visit when Father John spoke to the Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg. You guys are amazing. You're legendary here on campus. The passion, the leadership, the amount of non-alumni who have stepped up to make this such a special and vibrant club is exemplary for the rest of the nation and world. So thank you to everyone in Gettysburg.
You know, I know how much you have on your plate right now. You're a very busy guy, and we respect your time. And we just wanted to, we think the work that you're doing is so important. And I'm glad you mentioned the people who are not alums who are active in the clubs. Jim Conrad from our club made sure that I knew before going on with you that you are a hero for the Subway alumni community. And they're certainly a driving force behind the Notre Dame Club of Gettysburg. But, you know, before we get into what you do as the vice president for university relations, I thought it would be good to just sort of get a little bit of your background, because when I look at, when I've watched interviews with you, and when I look at your background, what I see is you living out this mission that goes all the way back to Father Sorin of Notre Dame being a force for good in the world. So, you know, we'll get into what you do as vice president for university relations, but starting way back in the day, you graduated from Notre Dame in 1984, having studied government and the PLS program, which is the Great Works of Literature. Did you have any idea back then that you would eventually be spearheading such a level of leadership at Notre Dame?
Absolutely no idea whatsoever, Pat. I don't think I've ever really kind of known even what the immediate next step has been. And it's funny because dealing with a lot of young people, they talk to me about a career plan, and I've never thought that way. I've always thought that what I was doing is all consuming at the time, and how can you take what you're doing to the next level, at a level that nobody else imagines. And if you do that and do that well, then other opportunities will come your way. And then you have to pray that you have the discernment to make the right choices. And I've been incredibly blessed along the way.
And you must have an awful lot of interesting stories just by focusing on the moment, staying in the present, and doing the service that you feel is your calling to do. And immediately after you got that bachelor's degree in government and PLS in 1984, your calling took you all the way to Chile to do missionary work. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was I had, as a great books major, as you said, Pat, I was struggling with the questions, and I thought at the time I wanted to get into elective politics. I even thought I'd worked for a couple summers in DC as a Notre Dame student in the US Senate. And I thought I might want to get in there, but I realized I'm no different than everybody else. Everybody comes in with kind of good intentions, but in that kind of ascent to kind of move yourself up, they become oftentimes overcome more with a self-centeredness than an other-centeredness. And so I thought, if I'm going to be different, I need an experience that would ground me in a God-centeredness and the other-centeredness. And so I went off to a nation that I knew little about, in Santiago, Chile, and it was under the Pinochet dictatorship. We were in a state of siege. 5 of my high school students were tortured there. I had to learn Spanish. I visited women political prisoners every Saturday, all of whom had been gang raped by their torturers and had electric current run through their bodies for several days on end. And it was an eye-opening experience for me on multiple levels. And it made me ask fundamental questions about what my view is on the human condition and fundamental questions about my faith and how I wanted to lead my life. It broke me down before I could start to kind of understand where is hope, where is meaning in a world where there's so much suffering and despair. So it was a formative experience for me, those couple years in Chile.
You know, I've sat in those wonderful classrooms in O'Shaughnessy Hall and then later in DeBartolo, and I've been challenged by the amazing professors at Notre Dame on the great books and on asking those hard questions.
Right.
But I can't imagine that even holds a candle to the experience you just described, and going into facing that kind of suffering in the world and trying to figure out what that means for where you come from and what you can do. What is your place in the world?
Well, it was those great thinkers, right? The theologians and philosophers and political philosophers that planted those questions in me and that desire to want to try to have that experience to answer them. And so they're the ones who drove me to Santiago and then ultimately trying to follow a path of service.
Well, your next step along your path seems to make an awful lot of sense. The highly acclaimed Peace Studies program at Notre Dame was your next stop, where you received a master's degree in 1988. So I assume that was an outgrowth of everything that you saw in Chile.
Yeah, it was the first year of that program, so it was yet to be highly acclaimed. That's how it was admitted into the class, as the competition wasn't very tough. But it was a perfect kind of follow-up for me, Pat, because here I was coming from a very strong faith-based experience, and there were 13 students that were chosen to be in that first cohort in that International Peace Studies program, and there were Communist Party members from the Soviet Union, from mainland China, India, Brazil, and then other people from India, Brazil, France, Japan, Great Britain, and then a couple of us from the United States. And it was a fascinating follow-up experience to take the courses, but also to live and to study with people who had vastly different backgrounds than you, different political formations, different levels of faith, totally different experiences. And it was a coming from the Notre Dame background, it was a struggle to find common ground and to find what we shared. And it was another wonderful formative experience for me, gifted by Notre Dame.
That's wonderful. And not long after your experience with the Peace Studies program, you were called upon to probably take on one of your earliest leadership roles on a big scale, and that was for the Center for the Homeless in South Bend. As I understand it, that wonderful facility had very humble origins. In about 1988, then Dean David Link of the law school, now Father Link, and Darcy Chisholm of what is now the McGrath Institute for Church Life were essentially running a shelter out of the basement of a church. It was a place to sleep and get a couple donuts in the morning, but that was about it. By the time you were tapped by Father Malloy, then president of the university, to take over, it had a lot of debt. It didn't have much of a budget, but you were there for, I believe, 8 years. And can you tell me what you were able to accomplish and what you learned from that major experience as a leader?
Rick, let me commend you for choosing Pat. He does his homework. He knows his stuff. He's well suited for this role. I came. I was 29 years old. I knew nothing about homelessness. I had not run an organization. So you can just imagine the dearth of talent that was interested in this job, for me to get it. And I figured at that point that I knew I had spent about 5 years of my life at that point living and working in shanty towns in Chile and in the Dominican Republic, but I didn't know much about poverty in my own backyard. And I was motivated by the comment that Mother Teresa said that poverty in the U.S. is worse than it is in a third world context. Not in any numerical or statistical way, but that if you're poor in the United States, somehow you're judged to be, it's a character flaw. Like you've brought this, in this land of great wealth, you've brought this poverty upon yourself, and what it does to the stigma and of the person is just horrific. And so I wanted to understand that and what she said about that. So I came, the place was struggling at the time, and I knew something very valuable. My secret to my success at the homeless center was that I knew nothing. And so you needed to rely on others, build as many good partnerships as you could, and then also rely on the power of prayer, rely on God, because there were so many situations. A mother would walk through those doors with 3 children. She was stoic until you'd show her some warmth, and then all of a sudden she'd feel the security to let the tears flow. And she had been sexually abused, and so had the kids, and life on the margins, trying to bring up these families was just almost beyond your imagination. And so I was deeply touched by those experiences. And, I've always felt that if you want to really learn a lot about our faith, and you want to learn about grace, you learn it from the people who are in the margins. It's the people who have the least vested in society, who in their brokenness are able to receive the word of God and reveal it in all of its truth, beauty, and candor to the rest of us who are busy, who do get caught up in the trappings of power, prestige, and possessions. And I was privileged for 8 years to be surrounded by a lot of people on a daily basis who reminded me of what is important, what is everlasting, and how to try to lead a life of greater integrity and faith and other-centeredness.
And I'm glad you mentioned Mother Teresa, because when people from around the world would flock to her and say that they wanted to help her in her work in Calcutta, she said something along the lines of what you just suggested, which is find your own Calcutta and go find where you can be of service. Find the needy people that are in your backyard. And you were doing just that in right there in South Bend. And just as you were, you needed to search more deeply than what we were getting in the classroom at Notre Dame, and you went to do the missionary work in Chile. You're not kidding when you say you wanted to understand the life of the marginalized and the homeless. You actually spent some time, you took 48 hours, I believe, and lived on the streets in Chicago and stayed in the homeless shelters to see firsthand what that experience would be like.
I did that simply, Pat, because I had been at the center for about 5 years. When I got at the center was really struggling. And 5 years later, we were kind of held up as a national model. We were raising a lot of money. We had just built a huge expansion, and we had renovated the whole facility. We built a campus. And I was asking myself this haunting question. I knew that I could lead the institution when it had nothing, but could I be the kind of leader that the center needed when it did have power, prestige, and possessions? And I was afraid deep within that the answer was no. You worry about the more you have in life, the more you've got to be vigilant about not drifting from your mission, not drifting from the core important things in life that are relational, and not about money raised, and not about articles written or praise given. And so I went and spent those 48 hours on the streets of Chicago because of something that St. Benedict, the founder of Western monasticism, in about 550 AD said. He said, if you think you've gotten ahead, it's a sign you've fallen back. Be content to be a beginner. And I went there to remember what it was like to be a beginner. I wanted to get a little bit closer to what it was like when somebody walked through those doors at 813 South Michigan Street for the first time, when they were coming terrified and fearful, and they had nothing and no dignity when they had to, subjected to walk through those doors. And I wanted to remember just to get a little bit closer to where they were when they came in the doors. And it was a radical 48 hours, and it really changed a lot about how we managed the business at the Center for the Homeless afterward.
And I ask all of these questions about your background because now you are, very high up in the leadership of the University of Notre Dame. Your responsibilities include fundraising. So, there's this perception you must overcome that you work underneath a literal golden dome and you're asking for money. And the reason I asked about all of this is because I think what people often don't understand is that everything you just described, from studying the human condition in books to going out and facing the most marginalized people, is what drives you, as far as I can tell, in what you do with development and with building an alumni network and friends of the university. Because I've watched some interviews of you, and you always remember that line from Father Soren that Notre Dame is, this is not just a place to go to school. This is a force for good in the world. So your responsibilities now as Vice President for University Relations include both the Notre Dame Alumni Association and fundraising. I don't want to say that Dolly Duffy and Ellie Kuhn stole your thunder, but they did actually join us for this communication before this Corby Connection to describe the wonderful work of NDAA. So I thought maybe we could take everything you just said and get into the idea behind fundraising and what it goes into as far as development for Notre Dame.
Right. Well, first of all, it's amazing to think that a place like the University of Notre Dame would take a chance on somebody like me and somebody with my background. I mean, if I look at the other vice presidents of advancement or development in alumni relations at other top schools across the country, many of them come from business backgrounds or backgrounds in, kind of elite higher education, et cetera. My path is very different. And I think it's one that is embraced by Notre Dame and has been embraced, since day one by Father Soren and the vision that you so eloquently articulated. And so, we come to this, and it's not about the money raised. It's all about the mission. But really, the mission is twofold, right? To educate the next generation of leaders who will graduate like you from this university, and to help transform the jangling discord of this world into a more harmonic symphony. They'll make a difference by the way that they lead their lives, not just through their careers, but by being good husbands and wives and mothers and fathers, or whatever their personal calling might be, to lead lives of integrity and service. And at the same time, at the university, to be able to pioneer research and knowledge, to break through cures and ways to resolve conflict, so that Notre Dame can be leaven for a world that is deeply in need, to be that force for good that Father Soren talked about, and to raise money for those programs, to those operations, is a privilege. It's a gift. It's an investment. It's not about the money raised. That's a means to an end. It's about fueling a mission to make this world a more livable place for all of us, and to hold up ideals that make it worth living, even when we fail, even when we have our own shortcomings along the way. So I feel incredibly privileged to be able to serve this mission to the best of my limited abilities.
And just to identify one or pick out one element of what you just said, developing the next generation of leaders and of husbands and wives and mothers and all kinds of business leaders and community leaders. Financial aid is obviously one issue that comes up. And I think one of the most profound things I've heard you say in other interviews is that, people say, well, what's my $50 or what's my $100 donation to the university going to do? When the reality is that I don't know, something like 40 full academic scholarships resulted from a number of contributions at $200 or less.
Exactly right. So my response when somebody says that to me, and I understand where they're coming from, but I say 46 students last year received full scholarship. These are kids that are coming from families with annual household incomes of less than $40,000. 46 of those students, and we have about 1,000 of them here at Notre Dame at this point in time, but 46 of them got full rides solely from gifts of $200 or less. So if you ask that question to me and you say that it makes no difference at Notre Dame, my response to you is look into the eyes of one of those 46 students and tell him or tell her that that gift makes no difference, because it does. It makes a huge difference in transforming lives. And the great story about Notre Dame and working in the shanty towns and working at the homeless center, one of the big challenges for service organizations, as important as their work is you deal with a very high recidivism rate. A lot of people will come and stay at a homeless center and they go out and then they fall back into poverty. It's very hard to help people make kind of a permanent break out of poverty and hardship and so forth in their lives. And every social service organization struggles with these high recidivism rates. At Notre Dame, when we bring a student who comes from tremendous hardship, just like at the Center for the Homeless, when they get here and we get them into this family for 4 years and they graduate, at 93%, we permanently break those cycles of poverty, of dependency, of hardship, and not only for their future families, but they often do so well as they go into the work world, they lift their parents and siblings out of poverty as well. Very few organizations have the success rate that we have in breaking cycles of poverty. Therefore, to whom much has been given, much will be requested. We need to do more. We need to open up Notre Dame to more and more students from these backgrounds, because we do have a unique ability to break those cycles.
You know, I thought about that message last night as I saw on the Notre Dame Day website, all of the small donations ticking in from so many different people. Right. Just knowing that this was the approach that you take, that this was really going to give hope and the ability to be resilient to these people. And I also read earlier before that your take on the Center for the Homeless or any homeless shelter is, sure, you can provide food, you can provide a place to sleep, but if you don't provide hope, then you're not serving the mission. And everything you just described about what could otherwise be viewed as mere fundraising, I mean, that's what we're talking about, is you are providing hope. You are providing a different trajectory in life for not just the recipient of that money, but for a family, potentially, a community. So I think that's wonderful. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, over the time since was a student there, there's been considerable construction and facilities are just state of the art. And I think this goes to what you said about the mission also including world-class research and the ability to contribute to the world in that way. The faculty members who I had were amazing, but I think that's been an upward trajectory for an awful long time. Right. Since your time as a student and now knowing what you do about building financial resources for a larger mission, how do you think that has served the goal of making Notre Dame a world-class intellectual resource?
Right. So, you know, when I was a student here, I lived in Sorin Hall, otherwise known as Sorin College, the oldest dorm on campus continuously. And it was built in 1888. Okay. And when we're building buildings today, we think about the Sorin Halls, and we think about the main building in which I sit right now with the Golden Dome that was built and rebuilt in 1879. And we expect to build buildings that are going to be around for hundreds of years. So we try to take that stewardship foresight that, we don't want to build something that people are going to lament and want to tear down 30 or 40 years from now, but something that is going to be a contribution that we as our generation can make to the Notre Dame family long after we've passed from this world. And it's not just with buildings, of course. It's with the gift of an endowment. It might be for a scholarship. It might be for a professorship. It might be for some type of service outreach program. But it's going to be here and now, but long after we're gone. We're going to be stewards of a future that we do not yet know. But we are confident that Notre Dame will be on the front lines, still making a difference in the world, maybe even at a higher level.
Lou, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I understand you have other responsibilities to attend to. I think you've done a great job laying out the mission of the university, and your background seems to put you in such a good position to serve that mission, pursue that mission for the University of Notre Dame. Thank you for all of that you do for the university, but also for sharing your time, even with the small clubs like Gettysburg. We appreciate your work. We're talking about the great work that you're doing. So thank you for joining us. And I'll kick it back to Rick in case he has any questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Again, Lou, thank you very much. We are very grateful for you taking time out and joining us this evening. And your invitation to come back and see us here in Gettysburg is open. We love to have you back and join us here. As far as Pat Colley and our Corby Connections, yes, we are very proud of what he has brought to our club. He is another one of the great leaders who stepped up, and we are very proud of him. And again, on behalf of the club here in Gettysburg, Lou, thank you for joining us here this evening. And go Irish.
Can I just say in closing, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Pat. And please, my warmest regards to everyone who's a part of the club in Gettysburg and to all your family members as well. You guys might be small, but you're mighty. And you have no idea how far and wide the reputation and the impact is of what you're doing in Gettysburg. And I have to say that, most universities have alumni clubs, but very few universities have clubs that are made up of alumni and non-alumni and people who just love the school. Nobody better captures that mix than Gettysburg. So it is an honor and an inspiration to be with you guys, and you do great work in living out Father Soren's vision to do good and to make a difference in your community and beyond. It's an honor to be here with you guys today. My prayers are with you. Please keep us in your prayers that we can stay humble and grounded and hungry to do Father Soren's work in this world. It's a bold level of expectation to live up to, and we need prayers.
Thank you very much.
You will have them.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless. Go Irish.
Go Irish.
Go Irish.